Hi everyone, Reinette Senum, and I just want to say welcome to my new subscribers. So glad my last video, which I put out a few days ago, Biden's gone and done it now, has gotten such a response. I have not posted any videos or articles in the last few days because I've been doing a really big deep dive, trying to come to the surface to give you more information, to clarify the playing field of what's really going on right now in Europe and Russia. This is going to be an extensive video. And I'm going to ask you, as I continue into this video, I'm going to ask all of you to suspend your belief system and just bear with me. Suspend your assumptions about the world around us, our history, past wars. I just want you to sit with what I have to say and just look through the lens after I get done with this video and see, are the pieces starting to fall together? Because there's a lot of different pieces I'm going to try to pull together in different directions. And if I'm not clear enough, please let me know. I'll do another video. So I want to talk about casus belli. Casus belli, known as an act or event that provokes or is used to justify war, aka false flags. As I mentioned in my last video, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. Of course, we had the Gulf of Tonkin, we had Pearl Harbor, we had 9/11, and even right now, I would even say the biological weapon known as COVID is equated to 9/11, and the biological shot is equated to Iraq. So now I want to talk about the theater of war. Now I have a beautiful map here. This is not to scale, obviously. And we have, of course, Europe, Eastern Europe, and we have Russia right here. And I want to show you the playing field. We have Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Germany, and Denmark. Baltic Sea right here. The notorious Nord Stream pipeline 1 and 2. And then we have a whole bunch of other pipelines feeding in from Russia, many of them across Ukraine, into Germany and the rest of Europe. Now, this is really important. So it was back in 2013, interestingly enough, that an announcement was made about the Baltic pipeline that was going to be built. They're going to be gathering gas from the North Sea. Denmark was going to do this and actually pipe it into Poland. Now, many Europeans were kind of perplexed by this. Like, why are you doing that? Poland, first of all, produces plenty of their own gas. In fact, they have such a surplus, they actually ship it off to the rest of Europe. So why would you go and have, to the extent, and build something like this? Did not make sense. Russia, again, was feeding in plenty of gas. It was not until 2014. And we always think of Ukraine as the poor little guy, he's a victim. It was in 2014 that the United States and the CIA decided to commit a coup d'etat. And ever since then, they've been living in hell, the people of Ukraine. Now, I have a video for you. This is the undercover audio of the Undersecretary of State, Victoria Nuland, who somehow this audio got out into the public where she was having a discussion with the U.S. ambassador for Ukraine. And she literally said to him, "This is who I want you to place as Ukrainian president." Listen to this video.
What do you think?
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister. And you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now. So we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yachts. And I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario. And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you think, in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking, in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys.
I think Yachts is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week, can't remember if I told you this or if I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah, I
Okay.
saw that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, fuck the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it. I think we want to try to get somebody with an international personality to come out here and help to midwife this thing. And then the other issue is some kind of outreach to Yanukovych, but we probably regroup on that tomorrow as we see how things start to fall into place.
So on that piece, Jeff, when I wrote the note, Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So
Okay.
Biden's willing.
So that's a pretty bold moment in time, that we are meddling to the point that we have created a coup d'etat and now replacing the president. I think we've done that a bit around the world. We're not too surprised, but it happened in Ukraine. So at that point in time, though, what was really interesting is there was 3 different pipelines basically making their way through Ukraine into the rest of Germany and Europe. And at that point in time, that is when Ukraine decided to stop paying Russia for their gas since 2014. Now they have a long-term gas agreement with Russia, and Russia has to keep the gas flowing. Why? Because it's not just going to Ukraine, it's going off into the rest of Europe and Germany. So Russia has been for a long time warning Ukraine, please pay your gas bill, and they won't. Now, once the coup d'etat happened in Ukraine, all of a sudden it made a lot more sense why this Baltic pipeline was being built, because Denmark, Poland, they were in on it. They knew this was going to happen. They knew that the pipelines going through Ukraine, once the coup d'etat took place, they were going to be threatened, and access to gas was going to be threatened throughout all of Europe. So this now makes sense. Well, interestingly enough, at the time, we also had the Nord Stream 1 that went from upper part of Russia here through the Baltic Sea into Germany. It was in 2018, I believe, that they decided to actually build the Nord Stream 2. Now, we had Angela Merkel, who was the chancellor at that time of Germany, the United States, NATO, saying, do not do business with Russia. Do not build that pipeline. They were against it. And the reason why is they don't want Germany, they don't want Europe to have a good relationship with Russia. Russia is the odd man out. They want to keep him and Putin and Russia the odd man out. They want to keep them the ugly stepchild. They don't want there to be a good relationship whatsoever. I'll explain that later. So Angela Merkel says, nope, we're building the Nord Stream, and they build it. And they build it. And sure enough, on the day that the Baltic pipeline had their inauguration and their announcement, these 2 pipelines were sabotaged. Now, granted, Nord Stream 2, right, had gas in it, but it was not distributing the gas yet, but the gas was in it. And I want you to watch this inauguration, this Baltic pipeline inauguration. And I want you to listen to the head of the EU director of energy and what her statement is about Putin and Russia. Listen to this.
In a move that Europe hopes will ease its energy crisis, leaders have inaugurated a new pipeline delivering gas from Norway to Poland. The Polish Prime Minister was joined by counterparts from Denmark and Norway, as well as EU representatives. It comes at a convenient time, as Europe is trying desperately to find new energy sources, and after Denmark and Sweden's discovery of a massive leak on the Nord Stream pipeline.
This completion comes at a time of Russia's brutal war against Ukraine and Russia's manipulation of gas supplies to destabilize our energy market and our economies. So today, we in Europe together are sending a powerful message that Russia will not succeed.
The project, which has been completed ahead of time, is an extension of an existing pipeline that will benefit mainly Poland, but also neighbouring states.
Now, what I find really fascinating is that the EU Director of Energy is saying that basically we don't want to allow Russia to manipulate the gas supplies and to destabilize energy security through Europe. Now, if I wanted to destabilize energy security through Europe and I were Putin, I would have taken these little gas lines right through here and I would have turned them off back in 2014 when Ukraine stopped paying their gas bill. But Putin didn't. If Putin really wanted to destabilize energy security in Europe, he's had an opportunity for 8 years now. So that narrative does not fly. That is the theater of war. That is the shadow puppetry of what's really going on. That is a common war tactic, which is to point the finger at the victim and accuse them of being the perpetrator. Okay, now, NATO. NATO. Putin has been warning the EU and NATO, stay away from Russia. And all these nations have become NATO allies. Ukraine was not a NATO ally until now they just signed their papers. All these other nations were, they're all in cahoots. So let's talk about NATO. NATO came into existence after World War II. And unfortunately, and I'm going to ask you this where you suspend your belief system, a lot of the Nazi heads and leaders went into NATO leadership. If you don't want to believe me, just look down and I have some links for you. We have Adolf Hölzing, who was the chief of staff for Hitler. And in 1961, he was placed as the chief of staff for NATO. So when Putin says he's not comfortable with NATO and they're really surrounding the Baltic Sea here, he's not comfortable with the NATO expansion that's heading towards Russia, there's a reason. And what's happened is ever since the Ukrainian coup d'etat, right, NATO has been making its way into Ukraine. And just a couple days ago, after we had a referendum of 4 different regions, and just last night I listened to it, the United Nations Security Council voted and said, oh no, we do not recognize this referendum. It was by force. It wasn't legitimate. We don't recognize it. And there's all these different regions in Ukraine that have been getting massacred and destroyed because of the coup d'etat from 2014 by the Ukrainian government themselves. And we've been paying for it with our own tax dollars. So there's a referendum. UN says we do not recognize it. And at the same time that Putin said, we recognize these 4 regions now as being Russian regions and we are going to defend them. The same day Putin had made that announcement and had a big party, we had Zelensky signing papers to fast track NATO into Ukraine, which is basically adding gas to the fire. So there's a reason why Russia is really uncomfortable with what's been going on. And again, NATO has been filled with Nazis. And you can argue, don't Google it, go under brave.com, and Nazis in NATO, and you'll see books and documentaries on it. It's well documented. So, Russia supplying all this gas to Ukraine, to Germany. Okay, now we know why the Baltic pipeline was put into place, because they were all in cahoots, right? These guys are in cahoots and they are part of NATO. Poland and Denmark are part of NATO. They're in cahoots. And they know what's going on, and they know there's going to be a coup d'etat in Ukraine, so they're setting up their pipeline because they know at some point in time this is probably going to be shut off. And amazingly, it's not shut off yet. Now, we do have another pipeline from Russia that goes through Poland into Germany, and just this last year, Poland cut that off. So they no longer have gas going through Poland into Germany. Why would Poland do that? Don't know. In addition, in Germany, it's such a setup for disaster. They have 6 nuclear power plants. They just took 3 offline this year. 3 more going offline in December. I'm not a nuclear power plant supporter, but you've got to wean yourself off of these energy supplies. You don't just cut us off, which is exactly what's happening right now. So let's talk about the theater of war, and let's talk about the false narratives that are made. And again, many times the victim is pointed out as being the perpetrator. It's a very common game. So this next video that you're going to see is from February, as I mentioned before, where we have Biden actually speaking with the German Chancellor. I think it was Olaf Scholz was his name. And interestingly enough, I didn't know the German Chancellor was part of this press conference. And I have it here for you. And I want you to watch what the Chancellor of Germany is saying about how, yeah, whatever the United States does, we're going to go along with them. Germany, of course, is part of NATO, along with the United States. And Germany is saying, yeah, whatever the United States does, we're on the same page. We're with them. Watch this.
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Day to turning off and pulling the plug on Nord Stream 2. You didn't mention it. You haven't mentioned it.
As I already said, we are acting together. We are absolutely united, and we will not taking different steps. We will do the same steps, and they will be very, very hard to Russia, and they should understand.
Now I'm thinking to myself, why in the world would the German Chancellor be supportive of the United States and other NATO nations if they're going to blow up their pipelines that's supplying Germany? That doesn't make sense. It almost sounds to me like the German Chancellor has an allegiance to something else other than their German constituents. It doesn't make sense. Maybe his allegiance isn't with the good German people, the German nation, but perhaps with NATO? I've been asking myself for a long time, why is it getting so bad? Why do we feel so powerless? Why is it war after war after war? Why is it that we're living in a country where we seem to be hell-bent, our government and our corporations, we seem hell-bent in poisoning our water, our food, our soil, right? Our air. We are hell-bent on doing biological experiments on the American people. As many people are now aware of, there's something called Operation Paperclip. Just search it online. And don't search it on Google. Go on brave.com. I would actually recommend that search engine. Very different results. Operation Paperclip, as many of you know, after we won World War II, America decided we're gonna pick up 1,600 technicians, engineers, and the maddest of mad scientists in Germany, Nazi German scientists, and we're going to bring them over to America, and we're going to give them a new identity, and they're going to live with anonymity, and they're going to continue the work, have handsome, lovely careers, settle them in. And I always thought to myself, why in the world would we bring such evil into America and fold that kind of evil into our nation? Why in the world would we ever do that? And what kind of scientific experiments do you want to continue? That doesn't even make sense to me. Until I saw a spoof of Putin speaking a couple days ago. And many times in spoofs, truth is being told. And in this false translation of Putin speaking about Nord Stream 1 and 2, he said,
but this is your wake-up call. The Nazis won the Second World War. Your leaders are the Nazis, and you are well aware of that.
Obviously, this was a spoof. It was a false translation, and yet it made my gut turn inside out. And whenever that happens, I have to stop for a moment and check in. And when I did that, I began to think to myself, oh, wait a second. What if that's really the case? And so I began to look through the lens of, okay, let's just pretend the Nazis really won. and that they were so diabolically brilliant that they knew they had to convince the world, the Americans, the Brits, that Nazism had been defeated. Because if Nazism had not been defeated, we would continue to fight it. So in order for it to continue, it would have to go underground while convincing the world it had gone away so it could continue to do its work. And when you look back in time, and when you just simply consider the fact that we brought over 1,600 scientists and technicians and engineers to continue their work, I'm thinking to myself, why would you ever fold that kind of evil into America? And then it dawned on me, well, maybe we were folding them into America because they weren't our enemy. They were just our team members. But we, the public, didn't know that. And when you think about World War I and World War II, the banks are invested on either side, right? Again, you have American corporations invested in Hitler, invested in Nazism. And these banks are going to win no matter what side the war wins. They're going to get their reparations. They can consolidate their power. They're going to make a lot more money, have a lot more control and say and persuasion. So they don't really care. I mean, if I were going to be diabolically brilliant, I would tell the world that I've been defeated so I could quietly go about my work undercover. That might actually help explain why we seem to have no protections in America, no agencies fighting on our behalf, and we continue to be aerosol sprayed. There seems to be a destruction of everything that relates to the natural order, whether it's our food, our bodies, even our soil, our water, the fact that we continue to genetically modify, even insects these days, and we are, spreading glyphosate so we know it's a carcinogen. It just seems like we're almost being experimented on every single day. And then when you look in our past, we're talking decades now of horrific experiments. For me, when I think about this, it actually makes more sense that the Nazis actually won World War II. We were just told differently. I want you to sit with this. Bear in mind, it's just a hypothesis. I'm not saying it's a fact. I might change my mind on this. It's not concrete for me. I'm not, solidified in this is a fact. But when I begin to think about, well, what if that were the possibility, things actually make more sense. So why am I telling you this? I know as a former elected official that when the public is not informed, they're powerless. They don't know where they stand. They don't know how to fight. They don't know where to go. And information is power. So if we come to realize that we had been duped since at least World War II, and that the Nazis really won, but they played a brilliant game and just made an announcement, had celebration V-Day, and then we all went off onto our lives thinking we were successful while they continued their work quietly under the cloak of night, things begin to add up. So I'm going to ask you to sit with it, comment below, let me know what you think. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but we're living in crazy times. And again, I just ask you to suspend your belief system, but the shoe just might fit. Please, let me know what you think. I'd love to have a response to this. Thank you, everyone.